Let the truck!
You are listening to What the Truck. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Monday, July 21st. Time flies when you're having fun, folks. I'm Thomas Wasson, hosting What the Truck today. Gonna have a pretty fun show. Coming up, we're gonna be talking with Tom Waldron, Vice President of Carrier Experience at Truckstop. They recently turned 30. That's right, the company's been around for quite some time. We're gonna be diving into that as well as looking at some data, AI, and a recent survey that they have conducted. Also coming up later in the show, we'll be having the folks at Synchro Logistics. It's Bill Jackson, founder of it. There is the world of LTL. It should be really, really exciting. They recently have a Synchro LTL claims index. So going to be diving into that action-packed show, of course, today. And then, speaking of which, let's get our ad read out of the way. We do want to thank our sponsors who happen to be Truckstop.com. So if you're ready, we're going to kick the video, and then we'll give them a shout-out.
Spend less time searching and more time hauling loads with the Truckstop Load Board. Find the right load at the right time to put more money in your pocket. Learn more today.
Definitely want to check them out. If you're ready to move more freight, make more money, and manage your freight business with speed and confidence, look to truckstop.com for tools that transform the way you move freight. Learn more at truckstop.com. Give them a shout out, give them a look. Check it out. Well, let's dive into some headlines first here. This is courtesy of the FreightWaves.com website. The first one pertains to shipping rates. So Drury is the data source. Ocean rates have fallen for the fifth straight week. However, rates remain higher than late April levels. And so when we're looking at the Drury's World Container Index, it tracks ocean freight rates. It declined 2.6% this week, the fifth consecutive week. Analysts said in the update that the trend indicates a significant shift in market dynamics following a volatile period induced by the increases in U.S. tariffs in April. So looks like we had the stuff going down in April, a subsequent China-U.S. tariff pause. Although we saw a lagged market reaction and rates climbing in May, we even saw them surge into early June. The upward trajectory has not been sustained as rates have steadily dropped since mid-June. So what comes up must come down. You can check that out on the FreightWaves main site. This one's one of my more fun ones. The second article here, it talks about tomatoes. That's right, folks. Anytime I get the opportunity to talk about random vegetables and stuff, you know I'm not going to pass that up. This one comes from FreightWaves' Noy Mahoney. The U.S. is ending the tomato trade agreement with Mexico. Some have met it with praise. Some have criticized it. After the Commerce Department terminated the 2019 tomato suspension agreement between the U.S. and Mexico last week, reaction from the stakeholders and the public was divided. It turns out that if you sell tomatoes in the U.S. from Mexico, they're controlled by the U.S. Department of Commerce through what is called a suspension agreement. What that means? Well, it sets the minimum pricing and regulates the sales between growers and importers. The big question we were dealing with was whether Mexico-based growers are dumping exported tomatoes into the U.S. at lower prices that are undercutting what we could make from the tomatoes ourselves. And so there's quite a bit of tomato drama. Along with ending this tomato suspension agreement, the Trump administration imposed a 17% duty on fresh tomatoes. So unfortunately, folks, your tomato prices may go up a little bit, but I mean, tomatoes are kind of cheap. It's very, very fascinating. Check it out. All right, in other news, this one is air cargo. The U.S. is moving to restrict Mexican airlines over cargo and competition concerns. The Department of Transportation plans to end a Delta Aero-Mexico joint venture unless Mexico complies with the aviation agreement. So they've threatened to dissolve it, including forced relocation of all cargo carriers in 2023 to a secondary airport. It looks like it was an anti-competitive behavior on the part of Mexico's government. It is also, though, Mexico is not alone. This has put European companies on notice that similar measures could be taken against them if U.S. airlines are restricted from their airports in a way that could disrupt the competitive balance. That's a lot to talk about. I guess at the end of the day, sharing is caring, folks. And when it comes to airport, make sure that everyone has a spot or at least a terminal. All right, this is something that I actually wrote. That's right, yours truly. Daimler Truck, the large German OEM, is looking to the old world for its new zero emission vehicles. This comes as the Mercedes Benz Trucks e-Actros 600, that's their cab-over version, you can probably see that in the image for watchers, is growing in Europe amid uncertainty in the U.S. Well, the big challenge with that, I went to their Capital Markets Day. Unfortunately, that the U.S. has now cut a lot of the incentives, whether it be carb. I guess they're going to what we would call a low-carb diet here in the U.S. Regulatory environments and incentives remain in Europe, so it's still viewed as a favorable area. Part of the reason is because EVs are more expensive, so that means more margins. The other part is that governments are working on infrastructure. If you've ever been to Europe and they say you'd drive a long time, it's much smaller than the United States, and so when we're talking about hauling, length of haul is another factor. A lot of these EV trucks are in a more favorable position just because they don't have like the big long haul in the US where we still need diesel units. So you want to check that out as well. That's from the Truck Tech newsletter. The other one is part of Outrider. You can check it out on FreightWaves.com. So let's kick it over to our first guest now without anything else to do. What was the Monty Python quote? I don't remember. And if I remembered it, I saved as a copyright claim. So without anything to do, what's the word? I can't get it. We'll ask the guest. All right, let's bring in our guest, Todd Waldron, Vice President of Carrier Experience at Truckstop. Todd, super excited to have you on the show. Welcome. First, tell us, how have you been?
Thomas, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I've been doing well. It's been a great weekend, and summer's been off to I'd say a great start, but now the end is coming quickly. So trying to enjoy it while I can.
I feel in the same boat. You finally start to get used to summer and you realize it's about to get over and you're like, crap, I still have a list of things I need to do before the weather turns sour. But let's talk about, speaking of things to do, you guys are recently celebrating your 30th anniversary. Huge thing. Tell us a little bit what that means to y'all and give us some of the backstory. That's been a very long and prestigious legacy that we're excited to be celebrating here on the show, and go from there.
Yeah, 30 years. It's an amazing milestone. I'm super excited to be here. So I've been in the industry for 16 years. So Truckstop has been and played such a pivotal role in my career in transportation and logistics, and has been just a staple of an organization that entire time. So now to be an employee here and to be celebrating the 30th anniversary is something that's very exciting. And we've took a little step back in time, but also a step into the future as we have our founder, Scott Mosgrip, back in the CEO seat in the interim, and just excited to see how things have been progressing here as an organization. So it's very cool to see what we're doing and what we're coming out with and what we're bringing to the industry, and just to hear from customers too, in the seat that I've been in as a former customer, and be able to talk to those today and help design and develop new things with them has been such a pleasure and an honor. So it's exciting times.
Well, let's talk about first the customer aspect in regards to your survey. Then we'll dive into more future-looking stuff, including AI. So the first one, I really like the survey you guys recently released. You guys have the Truckstop surveys. One of them is very fascinating. It's showing that it turns out that a majority of drivers, a slight majority, are getting a little optimistic. Tell us a little bit about the history of this survey first, then we'll dive into that recent release.
Yeah, we'll be releasing the survey here in the next couple of days. So you heard it here first with some of these stats, but 60% of drivers optimistic about the freight future. And so we look at this wave of confidence, and we see technology playing a pivotal role in that confidence, right? We're met with challenges day in and day out in transportation. We have old legacy challenges that we're continuing to work on trying to solve. And then we have new challenges that continue to come up and impact what we're doing. Things like freight fraud and some of the things that have really grown in scale over the last couple years. But carriers are really experiencing real gains from this technology. So we're seeing the biggest impact in freight and fraud prevention, route optimization, and then the ease of using tools such as AI-powered tools or other things like that. And so 50%, so over 50% say that fraud prevention efforts have significantly improved. And then 60% in our survey, we saw results of carriers say that paid load boards are now easier to use than they were when they started. And so we're seeing this embracing of technology, which I've seen in the last 10 years have been a long increase in road to adoption and acceptance, but we're seeing that begin to provide significant value in the carriers realizing and understanding and being able to see that value as it relates to them and not just logistics providers and or shippers. And so technology is giving carriers greater control, more security, higher efficiency, and is leading to this positive outlook. And so it's taken some time, but we're really starting to see that adoption. So it's encouraging.
And we appreciate y'all giving us the exclusive here. I'm pulling up some more of the data. I really like what you're talking about on new carriers having the positive impact of technology. I remember when I managed drivers, the hardest part was getting them to embrace said change. I had a guy who would foil wrap his driver tech unit because he didn't want to be watched. He actually put foil around the device, and then we found him somewhere outside of Arizona. He turned out to be okay later, but we had to get him to remove it. So this is fascinating. When we're looking at some more new technologies having a positive impact and embracing change, the survey has noted 70% of drivers, including 79% of those under 35, say they feel comfortable using emerging tools and technologies. That's kind of a big deal. I don't ever know when drivers can agree on something or be remotely happy. So this has to be a positive trend.
Yeah, absolutely. So I ran a trucking company, 115 trucks, and the feedback that we gained and gathered from drivers, like you said, would be very varying in degrees, and a lot of them might have disagreements on what they most prioritized or wanted, or what they thought was best for the company and for the drivers. But it was encouraging to see that 79% again under 35 are comfortable using it. And so you look back, and the foundation to this, I believe, has really been the data sharing component. And so the last 10 to 15 years of focus on interchanging data, connections between TMS systems and or truck equipment and systems, Internet of Things, starting to provide new touch points in the equipment and with the driver. And then data accuracy and integrity were such a big challenge. And so this focus on what AI can do for the industry stems back to setting this foundation of openness to data sharing, starting to get more comfortable with sharing your data and what people are doing with your data, improved connection in a way of connecting the data, and then accuracy in the data that is now enabling AI to shift from a background tool to a daily decision-making aid. So we're really entering and blowing up in this new phase where it can help carriers reduce costs, boost uptime, and simplify operations. And so drivers are now achieving this value from these tools, and then it also in turn enables us to be more accepting of it. Right? If you look at, everybody will complain or talk about how Google or their phones are tracking them or listening to them, but yet the value we achieve from Google Maps or these tools and telling us how long it's going to take to get somewhere or how busy a location is has outweighed that fear in that concern. And so we're seeing that breaking point where value is reaching the drivers, and they're seeing things in route optimization, AI assisted dispatch, and things like predictive maintenance were really the top three applications that the drivers and carriers cited as they're seeing value in.
That's one of my favorite comments is you hit the nail on the head. We're finally using AI. The data is all there. One of the big things, I remember when visibility was the buzzword. We were just happy to like see where you are. And now it's crazy. I want to get your thoughts on this. It feels like the past 5 years we went from surprise, we can finally see where your truck is, to now we can predict when it breaks down. I can offer you all these services. What are some of the things that you're seeing in the AI? Was there kind of an aha moment, or was it something where the devices got smaller, the bandwidth got better, I can finally transmit it? Was it like this big combination, or just slow and steady grind when we're looking at, because it does feel like I'd flipped the switch and now there's AI everywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a slow and steady progression, right? You had the driver's acceptance of this. So I go back to the days when MacroPoint was really the only solution with the flip phone. And then you had new entrants with Four Kites and Project 44 and things like that coming in to get the location. But the adoption was a long road period of time. You started to see brokers and shippers requiring it, but it wasn't until, and you'd see slowly adoption from drivers and then them slowly accepting it. But it wasn't until that became a service metric that was related to if you were going to get freight or not, as far as your tracking compliance, that we really started to see new ways to incent and hold carriers accountable to sharing that data. But the other aspect, like you said, that's been a trend, an evolution, was the connection and the data accuracy, so that we could implement these systems, and these systems could actually react to the data and the information we were seeing. And then we also saw an influx of outside money coming into transportation because of the size of the industry in the market. So many companies and outside investors wanted to get into this industry. And because of that, they started to realize how challenging it was for technology to actually work in this industry. So it took both those happening at the same time that was forcing this underlying improvement in connection and data that now we've really started to see take hold. But I mean, you look at the solutions as far as, intelligence in the camera systems, intelligence then on the maintenance side, as far as predicting when things might go down and when to do preventative maintenance versus reactive maintenance, and how to mitigate costs like that. So yeah, I think it's been a long evolution of multiple things that have really helped get us to the point we are today.
Well, let's talk about where things are heading as well. Looking ahead, AI is going to be one of the big ones. I like one of your points earlier where you talk about the incentive structure. So shippers and stuff were very much, it behooves you to share this. Now providers are saying, well, by the way, now that you're sharing it, we can help you with it. What do you kind of see in the next 6 months to a year that folks, especially drivers as well, should be paying attention to? Because it does feel like we're moving from, I know you've got to give something up, but now I'm finally giving you something for it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be another thing is exposed intelligence, BI, through different interfaces and dashboards that now is exposing some of the different learnings and things that either the AI is doing or what the AI can do. And so that's one. I think the other is just continued direction and co-opetition of sorts, where data sharing and being more open to the level of information and open to how can we get better together in this ecosystem rather than just trying to compete against each other. How do we leverage our strengths as historically competing competitors, but you leverage our strengths to be more efficient together? And then, you see a number of things as far as decision making and pricing will be the other major area of change. Is how do we now embark on a relationship that is supported by intelligence and AI, but yet how do we hold true to that foundational relationship and continue to have a good relationship? So AI will continue to grow in pricing intelligence, matching intelligence. How do I find the right truck for the right load, and maximize and optimize my procurement schedule as a logistics company, and utilize people and tools like Truckstop to play a role in that procurement and that matching, and then help to grow the relationship at the same time.
Well, I'm excited about that. I'd have a lot less wrinkles if I had that technology whenever I was trying to pick loads, because the issue was I never knew it was
Amen,
the
man.
right one. And then it turns out I picked one I thought was great, but then the final 3 loads were not so great. And so I think that's one of the directions I'm curious as well, as we kind of wrap things up, is that we're finally going to help people make informed choices instead of I need to be above X amount per mile and just try to make lots of fat money.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you look at how many moves and how many variables are in the decision if I'm going to take this load or not. So technology can help enable and assist that decision to look at what destination can I get the best backhaul, or can I get my home time more frequently, or things like that. But it's exciting as we look at Truckstop. 73% of carriers say that Truckstop.com is a brand that they trust, and 69% believe Truckstop.com will lead the freight industry for the next 30 years. And so it's just exciting as we talk about this technology landscape, and then the longevity of a company like Truckstop.com, and the things that we're talking about internally here, and the things that we're working on. And we see those come together in a really exciting, cool way. So I love getting out, talking to carriers and drivers and our customers, and looking at new ways that we're going to help build better things together. So.
And if folks want to build better things together and work with y'all, what's the best way to get more information if they want to find out? Where should they get that info?
Absolutely. Truckstop.com. Our website is a great place to go. I'm on LinkedIn at Todd Waldron. I have my LinkedIn out there. And then also we have a LinkedIn Truckstop presence as well, truckstop.com. So you can see, reach us on LinkedIn, and also Facebook is a great way to reach us as well.
Perfect. Todd, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations. Happy 30th for Truckstop. And for here's to 30 more years as well. I always appreciate having y'all on the show. We'll definitely catch up again soon.
Awesome. I appreciate being here. Happy 30th to all of our customers and everybody that's been on this journey with us. Thanks for having me.
We're going to switch gears a little bit here. We're going to be bringing on our next guest. We're going to switch over to the LTL space. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. I'm not as familiar with it, but it is one of the underpinnings as a trucking expert. It's kind of like if you're a fan of Carolina-style barbecue sauce or Memphis-style, we're all going to use it over the same thing, but sometimes it's important to learn it. I'm excited to welcome on the folks from Sync Logistics, Bill Jackson. He's the founder of it. And Bill, this is some really cool stuff. I'm excited to have you on the show. First, though, tell us about yourself.
Sure. Bill Jackson. I founded Sync Logistics back in 2010. We're a 4PL based in Raleigh, North Carolina, just under 100 million in revenue. Been in LTL from the beginning, although we have quite a bit of truckload work. So excited to be here with you.
And when we're talking about the LTL versus truckload, I always liked it because I had to deal with in my trucking career line haul moves. And so people would say, well, LTL is different. They have different trailers. Like there's a truckload order in there somewhere, I swear. Tell us some of the things that makes LTL very unique compared to the truckload side. And then we'll dive into this index that you all have created to help folks understand some of the claims process, when you're piling everything in instead of just having a single trailer.
Yeah. It's funny. When I started the business, I was selling truckload and LTL. And frankly, once I discovered blanket rates, I found LTL to be a much easier product to sell. From a pricing perspective, there's a lot more standardization. I do think conceptually, it's easy to understand. We just had the Truckstop gentleman on, and anybody that's been in truckload for any period of time knows that one lane can change hour by hour, much less day by day and week by week. LTL was a lot more stable from that perspective. So from my perspective, that's a big difference in terms of pricing, but also, and what we'll get into here is from a claims perspective. LTL freight gets touched a lot more than truckload freight. You're putting 8, 10, 20 customers on one truck, and then you're moving it through a network. And a lot of different people are touching it all the way to the end. And there's just more opportunities there for things to go awry, as opposed to full truckload where you load the truck, it's full, and it gets to its destination, and the people who care about the freight unload it. So just a different claims experience there.
And I feel like if I'm using LTL, then I want to know, how do I stack up? Because I can imagine that there's a lot of competing LTL firms. I have certain amounts of claims, but I'd like to know if I'm getting more claims than the other guy. So this index is super fascinating. Tell us first what the LTL claims index is, and then give us a little bit of the backstory about what went behind making it.
Yeah. So the LTL claims index, really, it comes from my own personal frustration in the LTL space. What it does is, going back to the first quarter of 2020, and then going forward, every quarter we gather from publicly traded companies as well as privately traded companies. We gather their information and we're able to put it together based on a weighted average, based on their market share. So this is the first time that an industry-wide claims index exists. And we'll get into more of the how it actually works, I know, shortly. But the genesis of it was that central frustration I had. Like how many claims, what's normal? Am I not normal in terms of what's happening to my freight? And what we found through this is that, number one, this is a much bigger number than I think anybody realized. So LTL is a $100 billion space. And what you can see in the first quarter of 2025, call it 0.35% is what the claims ratio is. And that's really what the LTL carriers pay out in claims. Well, on 100 billion, 0.35% is $350 million. So $350 million in claims. That's just what gets paid out. That's not what was claimed by vendors. But for context, $350 million, you could buy 4.5 F-35 fighters. You could pay for the full salary. The average salary of an NBA team is $140 million. You could have the LTL industry could have 2.5 NBA basketball teams for the payroll for the amount of claims that are being paid out. So it's a really big number, and it's a source of frustration for everybody, carriers included. Like everyone's cooperating together to reduce claims. But this is the first time that we've been able to put a number on it.
And let's talk about, we'll pull that LTL claims ratio index chart up again. You mentioned the 0.345%. When we looked at the first quarter of 2020, at the very far side, it was even higher. We could have maybe gotten 8 F-35 jets at 0.588%. Talk about some of the things. Was it because we're bringing in all this COVID stuff, so everything's just getting tossed around? Or is it something where these LTL carriers are kind of using technology? Or is it, from my favorite trucking analogy, are we in fact hiding it somewhere else in the balance sheet?
Well, the answer is yes. The answer is yes to all. So number one, the LTL carriers, without a doubt, have invested, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in getting better at their networks, and they're consolidating. So best practices are spreading across the carriers. So number one, carriers are doing a great job here. But really what you see in this index, you see the downward slope. And that slope actually is a 9.2% per year decrease. So anyone initially looking at it will say, wow, okay, so things are paying off, things are getting better. But in the first quarter of 2020, the same amount in payout in terms of dollars was made as in the first quarter of 2025. So what's really happening is the payout is remaining basically flat. I mean, the reality is there's been variation in between, but by and large, it's been fairly flat. What's really been happening, which I think is probably greater than 50% of the cause, what's really been happening is that a claims ratio, this is what the carriers use, it's the payout amount divided by the total LTL revenue. So what's been happening is the payout's been flat, but the underlying cost of shipping has gone up about 6% per year since 2020. So I'd love to say that we have fewer absolute claims, and I can't say that we don't based on the data that we have, but it does seem like when you're trying to do an attribution of why things are happening, this happens to be more of a math story in terms of underlying rates going up with payouts remaining fairly fixed.
One thing I like is you also wrote in there, could be the flat growth would be the role of limitation of liability. And so there's some things where you can limit liability, reporting windows, documentation. So if I'm being clever about it, I could say, if I'm the guy who's supposed to limit the claims, they're like, well, Thomas, you really, in order to keep your job, you really got to keep that a flat number here, even though we may see it up or down. They're putting in some limitations. So that means as a shipper, I also need to evaluate for my partners, is this LTL person going to cap me out, or is this person going to, I guess, pay me? That brings another dimension into the decision making.
It does. I mean, you're 100% right. When you look at the actual, so we're still working on gathering this data because it's much more difficult to get carrier contracts going back that far. But in our own experience, the limitation of liability has generally remained fairly flat. So you're correct in that 100 pounds at a 10-cent limitation of liability, you're going to get $10 recovery, right? But if the value of that freight has gone up, well, you're just, SOL, as they say. So yeah, there are people internally within the LTL carriers who have a target to hit. I definitely want to make sure that this chart is not seen as us saying that the LTL carriers aren't doing well and aren't doing their jobs. These are just the numbers and these are the facts. We do know that they're doing better in terms of how they package freight and how they handle freight. But the reality is that you can see what you're showing here, the LTL PPI, that's from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can see that going up. The Consumer Price Index has also been going up. Limitation of liability, our estimate is that it's been pretty flat. The contracts that we're looking at, we have not seen limitation of liability going up in our blankets or with the customer-specific pricing. So there's exactly what you're saying. There's someone there whose job it is to manage a bureaucratic process to make sure the documentation is exactly right within the timeframes and all along the path. if you don't hit those targets, you're not going to get paid.
I feel like we need some of those guys in Hollywood. There's somewhere out there a motion picture executive watching this and going, man, why can't I get my thing flat like that? Look at that CPI and PPI moving up, and we're just hanging out on that index. Let's pull up another one, the contract rate, PPI and claims ratio. This one is fascinating. So it looks to me as I'm looking at it, the LTL contract rate is so far beating the LTL PPI. So we're trying to outrun these costs. But at the same time, like you said, look how on an index from 2020 being 100, the claims ratio has declined. And so it does look like a situation where, we're using a little bit of Hollywood style accounting, bringing back to my funnier pun earlier, in trying to figure it out. And so do you think that's one of those things where it's just a byproduct of higher costs in general? I know on the trucking side, we continuously read about costs are getting higher, wages are higher, claims are higher, accidents are higher. Does LTL also run into the same challenge, or is it also stuff where warehouse injuries and other stuff may even add more fuel to trying to keep these other levers lower?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, it's not profit taking in terms of LTL carriers. You're absolutely right. The cost of drivers, insurance has been increasing at double-digit rates. Hiring people has been difficult. At the same time, you've had consolidation. You have a little bit of leverage in the space. All of those lead to the need to recover those costs through rate increases. And really, what you're looking at here is the net effect, just cumulative effect of GRIs. Right? Every year, every LTL shipper knows there comes this GRI period, and there's a negotiation that happens. The cumulative effect, as you look at this chart in terms of contract rates, is from 2020 to now, you're paying 40% more for the same LTL distance. Now, the product, the service has gotten better, but it's still 40% more. And you then can see how, again, on the claims ratio side, that's just the two look awful correlated, don't they? And so that's really where we're digging in the next phase of the claims ratio is tying it to an incidence rate as well, because I think that'll shed a lot of light on, are the incidences of claims going down or do they remain the same? That's the next step here for us.
And looking at what goes into the data sources, I know publicly traded LTL companies report some of this data. You can get data from a lot of ones. I'm curious about the Yellow aspect, because I heard Yellow, I had to speak ill of the departed, but I heard they were very cheap, which would lead me to believe that maybe they had more claims. Do you think there's a Yellow and non-Yellow adjusted index as well that would show potentially the impact? Because I remember when we reported on it, it did feel as though there was a lot of capacity that they had in the market that kind of vanished. And I think, when did it come out? Was it 2020? But I want to grab your thoughts on the Yellow thing as well.
Yeah, Yellow, I'd say, from again, not to speak ill of the dead, but I think you're right that Yellow is not known for its for the highest of quality. I don't think it was a bottom feeder necessarily either. But at the same time, I think Yellow's biggest impact on the space is what's happening right now, that even now, all those terminals are still being sold off and bought up. So there was this temporary loss of capacity along a lot of lanes. There's an increase in price. You can see in the claims index that negative slope occurred. I think, what was that? I think it was 2022. It's sad how old you end up getting in this space. But you see that slope decrease. But the real impact, I think, from Yellow is the net consolidation in the space since then. So Yellow exits, but now you have Knight Swift getting involved, kind of piecing together a national LTL carrier. I mean, frankly, what FedEx is about to do in terms of the spinoff. There's just constant motion in this space, but I don't see a lot of brand new LTL carriers coming into the space. And what I'm hoping from the claims ratio here is that by publishing this kind of information, that we allow carriers to begin, especially the ones who have great reputations, allow them to publish what they're doing and compete based on lower claims incidence rate, because now there's an objective standard that's out there for them to say, see, we're worth the higher price because more of your stuff is going to get there undamaged and on time.
And when that does occur, I'm curious about the documentation and the process because it's very new to me. In truckload, if a full truckload gets messed up, you go through a claims arbitration, the whole thing. But when we're looking at the specifics of these smaller parcels and packages, is there something where I have to do a little bit of extra legwork to prove it, or is it kind of what's the process once these things occur for folks who may not be familiar?
Yeah. Well, number one, the word that comes to mind is bureaucratic. So it's an insurance kind of setup. The documentation is critical. Part of the reason that companies like mine exist and the 3PL, 4PL space exists is the concierge service you give on the claims side. Because when folks are doing it on their own, there's a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross. So from a documentation perspective, you're exactly right. But there's also the timing perspective, concealed damage, 5 days. And then there's also just, did you class your freight right in the first place, right? And with the dimensioners and everything coming forward, that's going to be interesting in terms of its impact. So I'd agree with you there. In terms of actually getting the payout is, that's the difficult part. And again, like I've said here, the claim payout, that's a 0.345. The reality is that, when I talk to LTL carriers and when I talk to people, I say, hey, what's a normal, rule of thumb in the space? They say it's 1%. So you might have a 1% claims rate where that's what the shipper is saying, hey, 1% of the value of what I'm shipping is damaged, but they might only be getting paid 35 cents on the dollar for that. Now, I'm not saying that's what the case is. We're researching that. But 1%, if you talk to anyone in the space, you'll have heard it before. And we're showing that it's a third of that in reality.
And one of the very fascinating things is you mentioned the type of classification, and I think recently there was a change. NMFTA had put something out saying that there is a updated as of July 19th. So thousands of commodities could be rating, quoting, and billing be impacted. So now we need to, when we're looking ahead, do you expect to see any changes to this index as we're making these classification changes? Does that mean like the bureaucratic levers will get changed not only on how the item is classified, but how much the claims maybe have to be paid out?
That's a really good question. My gut is that, what the LTL industry is doing here, I know it's a change for shippers, but it makes a lot of sense. And I'm hoping that there's a level of simplification that's going to occur. These dimensioners, there's be photographic evidence of the freight now when it's getting dimensioned on the front end. So that might actually improve the claims process, because if it's not damaged then, but then it's damaged later in the process, well, then you have evidence. So I'm hoping that in the interest of transparency, that kind of information will be made available to the shippers so that everybody can get on the same page and resolve the claims as quickly as possible.
And based on conversations looking ahead, what are you all thinking about for future predictions of the trend? I know we have Q2 data coming up in the next couple of weeks. What are some of your early thoughts right now? Because there's a lot of bigger questions about the whole trade bump, automotive, and LTL touches a lot of these American industries as well. Let's dive into some forward-looking thoughts as we're moving into the rest of the year.
Yeah, I don't want to get political on anything. So what I will say, though, is that, inflation has been increasing. It's 4.4%. I do think that there will undoubtedly be some industries that are impacted by higher costs, whether it's due to tariffs or whatever the case may be. So to the extent that you have that increase, I do think you'll see claims in terms of the urgency of them going up. Because the pounds of what you're shipping remains the same, but the value goes up. So at the same time, because of the increase in LTL costs, underlying LTL costs, I do think that they're going to still get that 6% rate. So I expect this 0.35%. I honestly, I'd expect by the end of the year for it to actually continue its downward trend. You can see in the chart that it's flattened out recently. So I'm hopeful that maybe that remains the same. But, I do think going forward, there's the most powerful force in the universe is mean reversion. And the mean here has been a 9% decrease. So I would expect that to continue, but it has to bottom out at some point. That's what I'll be looking for. And I think, there's a lot going on at once right now with these with the new changes and with kind of what's happening overall in the economy. Is there going to be a recession? Is there not going to be a recession? All that's going to have a big impact on where this number goes. Unpredictable impact.
Pure chaos. Bill, one final question as well while we have you on. I kind of wonder if I'm paying more and I keep seeing these GREs of 6%, I wonder if shippers are going to wisen up and say, well, I'm paying more for it, so I'm going to be a little more stingy and say there's a tiny dent in this box and send it back again.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's why, there's so many advisors to the LTL space, because it's just so much information to keep track of. And if you're a big shipper, you've got that expertise on staff. But those middle market companies, they're the ones that often need some help. And really, this offers them and carriers the opportunity to sit down, have a constructive conversation with each other, where the shipper can say, hey, you want this GRI? Tell me where you are in terms of claims payout ratio, right? Are you above or below? What's our incidence rate? These are the conversations I think people will have that'll make everybody better off in the space.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, Bill. Thank you so much for coming on the show as well. If folks want to learn more about not only this newly created Synchro LTL Claims Index, but also Synchro Logistics as well, what's the best way to get in touch? Check out what you're working on.
Well, if you're interested in the Claims Index, as you show here, you go to our website, click on Claims Index. There's a form you can fill out. We'll do a free consultation for you. But otherwise, hey, I started Synchro. I'm the founder. You can email me at bill@syncrogistics.com. And I'm not pretty, but I certainly, I'll be happy to send you an email. We're definitely looking forward to make the industry operate a little bit better. And this is our way to do it.
Perfect. Bill, thanks so much for your time as well. Great information. We'll definitely have to link up again once we get that Q2 data coming out.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time.
That's going to be a wrap for today's show, but we've got a little bit of housekeeping coming up while you're at it. We have some upcoming events and we have some upcoming announcements. The first one is FreightWaves, the Freight Tech Awards, the Freight Tech 100 has recently been launched. You can go on our website here. You want to do it. It's the annual Freight Tech Awards. Submit yourself, submit your friends. You go to freightwaves.com/awards. You'll click on the Freight Tech Awards box. You can then go to a button that says click here to nominate. We are going to pick the top 100, so you can put in as many as you want. You can put in your friends, your dogs, your cats, your stealth startup you don't want to tell anyone about, and then just tell us we'll have to sign an NDA, because apparently that's the funny thing to do these days. Anyone can do it. And then later we're going to bring it down to the top 25, the Freight Tech 25. That is announced at our Future of Freight Festival in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It is at an earlier date this year, so when you are signing up for F3, know that it is in October instead of our November one, so you want to check it out on live.freightwaves.com. Also coming up this week, you're going to get to see more of me, friends. Not only will I be hosting the Enterprise Fleet Summit coming up on this Wednesday. For those listeners, it is Wednesday, July the 23rd. It's going to begin around 9 a.m. It's the Enterprise Fleet Summit. That is right. Before I became a trucking analyst, was an enterprise trucking carrier expert. It has the word enterprise in it. So you'll get to see myself and Isaiah Buchanan. We're going to be hosting this thing. There's going to be a lot of great stuff on it. So we have a giveaway. And I'm really enjoying this one here. We're going to throw it up on the screen here, toss it into LTA, what the giveaway is. This is why you want to register for it and check it out. It's a griddle. It is a Blackstone 36-inch griddle. And that's right, folks. Very rarely on What's a Truck will you have a guy trying to sell you on the merits of a griddle. But you know what? That's what we do around here. Griddle Gang Unite. Listeners on XM Radio, you can see a picture of this griddle, and you can sign up and get your name entered to win this fabulous prize by going to live.freightwaves.com, clicking on Enterprise Fleet Summit. You're going to go and click the button that says register, put in all your information, and register now. Registration is free, so it doesn't cost you anything, but you could be the winner of a fabulous griddle. Final stuff as well, if we go to the live.freightwaves.com website, you definitely want to check it out on our events page. We have coming up afterwards, we have an in-person event on July 30th. It is the Supply Chain AI Symposium in Washington, D.C. You're going to get to meet all your heroes. I won't be there, but people smarter than me will be. It's at the really cool museum. It's the one that has like the spy museum and everything. And then the F3 Future of Freight Festival, of course, is October 21st through 22nd in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That is also where we'll announce the FreightWaves Top 25. So been an absolute pleasure. Coming up later on the week, we're going to also have some other hosts. So it's not just my pretty face, but I'm not going to tell you who's going to show up, but I also might be there. I'm keeping the suspense palpable. That's right. Where's the duty-free music that's ominous that I should have asked for earlier? It is somewhere around there, but we're going to have a lot more exciting stuff coming up as well. Big special thanks last week for Rob Carpenter for hopping in with me too. Those of you just joining us live, we're going to be on Apple, YouTube, and Spotify. This thing is also on SiriusXM on FreightWaves Drive Time on channel 146. Absolute blast. Wonderful show. Listeners, thank you so much. I'm Thomas Wasson. I'm going to be here. You're going to be here. You're going to see me on Wednesday. Enterprise Fleet Summit, live.freightwaves.com. That's a blast. I'll see you again soon.